Ladies and gentlemen, stop what you're doing and pay attention, because what I'm about to tell you is not just another headline. It is the collision of two nightmares. Now, on the one side, you've got Venezuela. The so-called Saudi Arabia of South America is literally collapsing before our very eyes. We're talking about 172% inflation, empty shelves, millions fleeing on foot, a nation with the largest oil reserves on the planet now bankrupt and broken. But on the other side, you've got Beijing, where Xi Jinping just rolled out nuclear missiles, laser weapons, and even robotic war machines for the world to see. And he didn't do it alone here. Right by his side was Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, three dictators shoulder to shoulder, smirking as they unveiled weapons that can strike anywhere on Earth. Now, here's the kicker. President Donald J. Trump just ordered the Pentagon to restructure the entire U.S. military for what he's calling the most dangerous moment in decades. He's warning that China, Russia, and North Korea are not just celebrating, they're conspiring against America. Now, ask yourself this. Is Venezuela's collapse just a tragedy of socialism, or is it the spark that sets off World War III? Now, stick with me, guys, because what we're about to see, what you're about to hear, will connect the dots from the streets of Caracas to the parades in Beijing. And we're going to show you guys exactly why President Trump is preparing for war. This is not theory. This is happening right now. Hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you so much, guys. I want to go ahead and start with Venezuela because this is the fuse that may already be lit. Now, on paper, Venezuela, it should be one of the richest nations on earth. The country is sitting on the largest proven oil reserves in the world, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, more than the United States. This is why for decades they were called the Saudi Arabia of South America. But today, the same country is now in free fall. So in 2025, the inflation rate has blasted up to 172%. That means cash is worthless. People weigh stacks of bills instead of counting them. They're weighing the bills instead of counting them, guys. Understand, picture that, okay? More and more Venezuelans are resorting to bartering for food or for medicine. And food itself, food is disappearing. In fact, the United Nations says over 75% of the population is food insecure. Grocery stores are empty. Shelves in the grocery stores are empty. Blackouts are constant, and the hospitals have collapsed. Doctors are warning that diseases that we thought were under control, like malaria, tuberculosis, they're surging back because there's no medicine. There's no equipment. Not even clean water in many hospitals. Now, do you guys have any idea what would happen if some of these folks crossed our border and brought those diseases into the United States? Oh my goodness. Comment down below that we need to keep our borders secure. Comment secure if you believe we need to keep our borders more secure than ever now. Meanwhile, the population is vanishing. Over 7.7 million Venezuelans have already fled. This is one of the largest refugee crises in modern history, okay? Families are walking across borders into Colombia, Brazil, and even beyond, often with nothing but the clothes on their backs. And the oil, well, the very lifeblood of the nation, this is a train wreck. Venezuela once pumped more than 3 million barrels of oil per day, but today production is down to just 400,000 barrels per day. Now, you might be asking yourself why? Well, this is because corruption rotted the entire industry. PDVSA, once one of the most respected oil companies in the world, is now a hollow shell filled with political cronies. Refineries are crumbling, pipelines are leaking, entire oil fields have been abandoned. And just to keep the lights on, Maduro is selling whatever little crude that he can at fire sale discounts in oil for goods deals with China, Russia, Iran, and Cuba. Instead of dollars, Venezuela is taking shipments of rice, medicine, and spare parts just to survive. This is not just an economic story. This is the collapse of a nation. And the question that should terrify the world is, well, what happens when a failed state that still has the world's largest oil reserves becomes a bargaining chip for America's greatest enemies. And so let's turn to Beijing, because while Venezuela collapses, the axis of authoritarians is celebrating. Now, let's be real. Insurance companies, they're not in the business of making sure that you save money. They're in the business of making sure that you don't ask questions. And this is how they win. That is why I partner with Chapter, folks. They know the game. They flip that game so that you come out ahead. Leslie Taylor, she found $1,000 in Medicare savings after Chapter reviewed her plan. Sharon got her coverage back after she got dropped. So here's the challenge. Who's going to keep winning, you or them? Now, most people have already chosen themselves. This is why they're calling the number at the bottom of your screen right here. Or if they're not doing that, they're going to askchapter.org/Ron, or they're dialing the number on your screen, 909-563-8279. Now, while Venezuela is collapsing into the ground, look at what just happened on the other side of the world. September 3rd and 4th, Beijing. Xi Jinping rolled out the red carpet and held one of the most chilling military parades that we've seen in decades. It wasn't just about China flexing its muscles. It was about who stood beside him. Right there on the review stand, Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, the three dictators, shoulder to shoulder, waving to the crowd as 20,000 troops, nuclear missiles, hypersonic weapons, and even robotic war machines rolled through Tiananmen Square. Now, this wasn't some innocent anniversary parade. No, Democratic allies were invited. Instead, over 20 authoritarian aligned leaders, they filled the stands. It was a declaration. A new axis of power is uniting against America. And the weapons on display, let's be crystal clear. These weren't toys. China revealed the DF-5C intercontinental ballistic missile. This is a monster that's capable of striking anywhere on Earth with multiple nuclear warheads. And they showed off the LY-1, which is the shipborne laser weapon system, their attempt to match America's cutting-edge naval defenses. They even paraded out drone swarms and robotic wolves. Yes, guys, mechanical predators that are designed for battlefield terror. But maybe, arguably, the most chilling moment wasn't what they showed us. It was what they accidentally let slip. Now, on a hot mic, Putin and Xi Jinping were caught casually discussing organ harvesting and immortality, talking about swapping organs, living forever, and ruling out end. Okay? Can you imagine these dictators ruling without end? Think about that. These men were not just fantasizing about power for life. They're talking about power for eternity. That's not leadership. That is obsession. That is dictatorship at its most ghoulish sense. And President Donald J. Trump, he noticed. On Truth Social, he posted a direct message to Xi. Please give my warmest regards to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un as you conspire against the United States of America. Now, that wasn't sarcasm. That was a warning shot, because while the world's dictators stand arm in arm, Trump is calling them out publicly and preparing America for what comes next. So the question is, how exactly is President Trump responding to this growing axis of authoritarianisms? Well, I want to go ahead and dive into his orders to the Pentagon, okay? Now, while Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un were parading their nuclear toys in Beijing, Donald J. Trump, he was issuing an order of his own. This was one that could reshape the entire U.S. military. Now, on September 3rd, Secretary of State Pete Hegseth, he confirmed that President Trump had directed the Pentagon to begin preparing for a full-scale military restructuring. Not a minor adjustment, not a reshuffling of the deck, a top-to-bottom overhaul of America's armed services to make sure that we are ready for whatever comes next. Now, Trump's message was clear. Restore deterrence, rebuild the military across land, air, sea, space, and cyber. No more relying on outdated systems. No more hollowing out our capabilities. This is about making America unchallengeable, because when dictators believe that they can conspire openly against us, deterrence has failed. Now, let's not miss the contrast here. President Trump has said it himself. It was the weakness of the Biden years that allowed Moscow and Beijing to grow closer and closer together. When America retreated, our enemies aligned. Now, Trump is promising the reversal. Confrontation, if necessary, but deterrence as the primary goal. Now, one system mentioned specifically is the Golden Dome missile defense. This is a shield that President Trump says China cannot replicate. This is part of a broader effort to harden our defense systems against hypersonics, nuclear ICBMs, and cyber attacks. But Trump isn't protecting. He isn't pretending that this is a peacetime business. He's warning directly. In fact, he is not waiting for the first strike. He's preparing right now. And drop a 47 down below if you think that that's a smart move for President Trump to start preparing right now. Now, this brings us to the bigger question. What happens next on the global chessboard? Because it isn't just about China, Russia, and North Korea. Other dominoes are moving, and one of the biggest is India. Now, let's zoom out just for a moment, because this battlefield isn't just Venezuela collapsing or China and Russia marching together. Other dominoes are tipping, and they could decide whether this moment explodes into a global war. Just take India, for example, okay? You've got Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He showed up in Beijing for Xi Jinping's parade. The first time in 7 years. Now, he didn't march with them, but his very presence sent shockwaves. Why? Because India is supposed to be one of America's most democratic counterweights to China. Yet, while Trump is trying to box Putin in, India has been buying up discounted Russian oil by the tanker load, feeding billions of dollars into Moscow's war machine. Now, President Trump responded the way that only Trump does. Tariffs. He slapped India with penalties and warned that the Middle East should step up and supply Modi instead. Now, in other words, if you don't stop funding Putin, we're going to go ahead and cut off your excuses. But India isn't the only piece on the board. I mean, look at the power of Siberia 2 pipeline, okay? This massive project planned to pump 15% of China's energy needs straight from Russia. This is on track to be completed within the next decade. Now, think about that. A single artery connecting Moscow's oil wealth to Beijing's industrial might. Some analysts are already whispering, will someone have to blow it up the way Nord Stream was taken out? Now, meanwhile, Europe is shifting. After years of dependence on Russian gas, they're now buying American energy, realigning with Washington. But while the West regroups, the East is consolidating fast. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, even Venezuela and Cuba. They're building together, they're binding together in a way that we haven't seen since the darkest days of the Cold War. And now the question that's hanging over all of this is very simple. How far will America's enemies go? And how much strain can America's allies take before the whole system snaps? But while we debate geopolitics, we cannot forget the human cost, because behind the inflation statistics and pipeline politics, millions of Venezuelans are living and dying in conditions that you can barely imagine. Now, behind every chart, every statistic, every headline, there are people. And in Venezuela, the human toll of this collapse is almost beyond belief. In fact, families are fleeing on foot across South America. Mothers they're carrying their children for days across the Colombian border. Fathers are risking everything just to put food on the table. Over 7.7 million Venezuelans have already fled. This is more than a quarter of the nation's population. And the people leaving, they're not just the poor or the desperate. They are doctors, guys, the teachers, they're engineers, the backbone of pretty much any society. This brain drain has hollowed Venezuela out. Hospitals are losing half their staff. Schools are closing as teachers simply walk away from their jobs, unable to survive. The very institutions that hold a country together are disintegrating. And so what's keeping Venezuela afloat right now? Believe it or not, remittances. The money sent from Venezuelans working abroad has become one of the country's biggest sources of foreign revenue, over $4 billion a year. Now, this is almost on par with what's left of their oil exports. Now, here's where it gets even more complicated. President Donald J. Trump has ended the temporary protected status for Venezuelans in the United States. So this means 348,000 Venezuelans who've been legally protected here could now face deportation. 348,000, folks. In fact, Trump has already resumed deportation flights to Caracas, the first in years. Now, think about what this means. Thousands of people sent back into a broken country. Now, for Maduro, it could cause increased instability. Now, for the people, it means returning to starvation and collapse. For America, this is a message. We're not going to carry the burden of a failed socialist state while its leaders conspire with our enemies. So here's the real twist. These returning migrants, they don't just resent Trump. They despise Maduro even more, okay? They may actually become the seeds of resistance inside of Venezuela, or they may fuel even greater chaos. So on the one side, you've got a nation that's imploding, but on the other side, you've got dictators that are parading these nukes, which brings us to almost the biggest question of all. Are we living through the first days of a new Cold War, or the first sparks of a very real, very hot world war? So this is where everything collides, ladies and gentlemen. You've got Venezuela's collapse, China and Russia's parades, Trump's Pentagon orders. It all adds up to a very terrifying question. Are we heading into a new Cold War, or is it the opening shots of World War III? President Trump, he's been crystal clear. Diplomacy is still possible. He's spoken with Putin. He's pressed Xi. He's kept the door open for dialogue. But at the same time, he warns, we must prepare for the worst. And analysts are sounding the alarm. They're calling this the axis of evil 2.0. China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, Cuba, and now even Venezuela, a coalition of authoritarian states more coordinated than at any point in time in modern history. They're sharing oil, weapons, money, even soldiers. This isn't scattered. This is deliberate. So here's the math. The United States, Europe, and the UK together control about $50 trillion in GDP. The Axis, roughly $22 trillion. Now, on paper, America and its allies are stronger economically, militarily, technologically. The West holds the advantage. But here's the danger. Economics alone do not win wars. In fact, China is churning out advanced weapons faster than anybody had expected. Russia is leading on the shadow economies and oil for goods deals in order to keep funding its wars. Venezuela is desperate, willing to sell oil for pennies on the dollar. And when desperate nations like this align with ambitious ones, history tells us one thing. Unpredictability leads to explosions. So the question is, it's no longer if America's enemies are conspiring against us. They are. We know that. We've confirmed it. The question is whether Venezuela's collapse becomes the spark that ignites something far bigger than economic crisis, something that could pull the entire world into conflict. And so that takes us to, the final close here. Like, here we are, guys. Venezuela is completely bankrupt, and they're starving with inflation exploding at 172%. Its people are fleeing by the millions. China and Russia are parading missiles, nuclear missiles at that, capable of striking anywhere on Earth, with Kim Jong-un standing proudly at their side. And Donald J. Trump has ordered the Pentagon to restructure our entire military, warning that conspiracies against America will not go unanswered. Now, the question is very simple, but it's terrifying. Are we watching the first sparks of World War III? Now, guys, I'm going to tell you right now, the story is not over. In fact, the next chapter may already be breaking as you watch this. And YouTube thinks that you'll really enjoy the next video that's popped up on your screen right there. The one that is being suggested to you right now, you need to click that video because it ties directly to what we just uncovered, and it could give you the missing piece of this global puzzle. Do not miss this video. I'll see you over there in the next one. Take care.